The day my wife told me I wasn't enough, I felt something inside me break. Not because she was leaving, not because our marriage was ending, but because the woman standing in front of me wasn't the same woman I had spent 10 years loving. Her eyes were cold. Her voice carried no emotion. And the worst part, she looked relieved. As if walking away from our marriage was the easiest decision she had ever made. But that moment was still months away. Back then, I didn't know my life was about to fall apart. Back then, I was still the man who believed love could survive anything. My name is Daniel Carter. I was 36 years old, living in Austin, Texas. I owned a small construction company that I had built from the ground up. I wasn't rich, I wasn't famous, but I was proud of what I had achieved. Most importantly, I loved my wife, Emma. The woman who once promised to stand beside me no matter what happened. The woman who would eventually destroy everything I thought we had. When people looked at us, they saw a happy couple. And honestly, so did I. We had a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood. We had friends who admired our relationship. We took vacations together. We laughed together. We planned for the future together, or at least, I thought we did. Emma and I met when we were both in our 20s. Neither of us had much money. She worked as a receptionist at a small medical office. I worked construction jobs 6 days a week. Life wasn't easy. There were months when we struggled to pay rent. Months when we counted every dollar before going grocery shopping. But we were happy. At least, that's how I remember it now. One night, years ago, we sat on the floor of our tiny apartment eating cheap takeout. The furniture hadn't arrived yet. The apartment was nearly empty. Emma rested her head on my shoulder and smiled. "One day we're going to have a beautiful house," I laughed, "hopefully with actual furniture." She giggled, then she looked at me seriously. "I don't care if we're rich, Daniel. What matters is that we're together." At the time, I believed every word. Maybe she believed them too, or maybe people change when life gives them options. The next several years were good. My company slowly grew, project by project, client by client. I worked long hours because I wanted to give Emma a better life. Every success felt like our success. When I bought our first house, Emma cried. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "You made our dream come true." Moments like that made every sacrifice worth it, or so I thought. The first signs appeared so slowly that I almost missed them. At first, it was social media. Emma began following luxury influencers, fashion models, celebrity lifestyles. Millionaires showing off private jets and mansions. I didn't think much of it. Everyone enjoys looking at beautiful things, but then her interests started changing. Suddenly, she wanted designer handbags, luxury vacations, exclusive restaurants, expensive jewelry, things she had never cared about before. One evening, while we were eating dinner, she showed me a photo on her phone. It was a massive mansion overlooking the ocean. "Can you imagine living somewhere like this?" she asked. I smiled. "It looks nice." "Nice," she laughed. "Daniel, it's incredible," I shrugged. "Maybe. But honestly, I'd rather live somewhere comfortable with people I love." For some reason, my answer seemed to disappoint her. I didn't understand why. At the time, it felt like a harmless conversation. Looking back, I realize it was much more than that. Over the next year, Emma became increasingly focused on wealth, not financial security. Not stability, luxury, status, the appearance of success. She spent hours watching videos about wealthy entrepreneurs. She constantly talked about people who made millions. And more often than not, she compared our lives to theirs. One evening, she stared out the window as a luxury car drove through our neighborhood. "I wonder what it feels like to never worry about money." I looked at her. "We don't worry about money," she sighed. "You know what I mean." No, actually I didn't. Because we already had more than I ever dreamed possible. We had a paid-off house, reliable cars, savings, a comfortable life. Yet somehow it wasn't enough anymore, and that frightened me. Then something happened that changed everything. Emma decided to launch an online marketing business. I supported her completely. I helped pay for courses. I helped set up her office. I encouraged her every step of the way. Watching her chase her goals made me happy. Within months, she began attending networking events, business conferences, entrepreneur meetups. At first, she always came home excited. She told me stories about people she met, ideas she learned, plans for her future. I loved seeing her passionate. But eventually, one name started appearing over and over again. Richard Collins. The first time she mentioned him, it sounded harmless. He's one of the most successful investors in Texas. A week later, Richard gave me some amazing business advice. Then, Richard knows a lot of important people. Then, Richard invited some entrepreneurs to a private event. It seemed like every conversation somehow led back to him. One night I joked about it. Sounds like this Richard guy is your new best friend. Emma immediately became defensive. He's just helping me grow my business. I raised my hands. Relax. I was kidding, but her reaction stayed with me. Something felt strange, not wrong, just different. Over the next few months, Emma changed. She spent more time on her phone, more evenings away from home, more weekends attending events. Whenever I suggested spending time together, she was busy. Work, networking, business opportunities. There was always a reason. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, marriage requires trust, and I trusted her. Until one evening, a moment so small that most people would have ignored it. Emma had fallen asleep on the couch while watching television. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. I wasn't trying to snoop. In fact, I almost ignored it, but the screen lit up. And a message preview appeared, just 6 words that made my stomach drop. I can't stop thinking about you. My heart started pounding. The sender's name appeared directly above the message, Richard Collins. And in that moment, for the first time in 10 years, I wondered if my wife was hiding something from me. For several seconds, I just stared at the screen. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the message wasn't what it looked like. But no matter how many excuses I tried to create, one question kept repeating in my mind. Why would a married woman receive a message like that from another man? I looked toward Emma. She was asleep on the couch, completely unaware of the storm building inside me. For 10 years, I had trusted her without question. Now, for the first time, doubt had entered our marriage. I quietly picked up her phone. My hands were shaking, but before I could unlock it, the screen went dark. I set it back down exactly where it had been. I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to invade her privacy. Not yet. Instead, I spent the entire night lying awake beside her, listening to her breathe, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the woman sleeping next to me was still the same person I thought I knew. The next morning, Emma acted completely normal. She kissed my cheek before leaving, smiled, asked me what I wanted for dinner. The same routine we'd shared for years, but something felt different now. Every smile looked forced. Every conversation felt rehearsed. Every glance at her phone caught my attention, and once doubt enters a relationship, it becomes impossible to ignore. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things I should have seen earlier. Emma started locking her phone. She took calls in other rooms. She smiled at messages she never shared with me, and whenever I asked simple questions, she became defensive. One evening, I finally brought up Richard. Seems like you spend a lot of time talking to him. Emma immediately looked annoyed. He's helping my business grow. I understand that. Then why do you keep asking? Her tone surprised me. I wasn't accusing her of anything, yet she sounded angry, almost guilty. I tried to let it go, but the feeling in my chest kept growing stronger. Then came the business conference in Dallas, a 3-day event. Emma seemed unusually excited about it. For weeks, she talked about nothing else. The morning she left, I helped carry her luggage to the car. She hugged me quickly, too quickly. Then she drove away. As I watched her disappear down the street, something inside me felt wrong. I couldn't explain it, but for the first time in our marriage, I didn't trust my own wife. The conference lasted 3 days. On the second night, I was sitting at home watching television when a friend called. His name was Mark. We'd known each other for years. After a few minutes of casual conversation, he casually mentioned something. Hey, isn't Emma in Dallas? Yeah, funny. What? I think I just saw her. I sat up straight. Saw her where? Downtown restaurant near the hotel district. A strange feeling spread through my stomach. Was she alone? There was a brief pause, then Mark answered. No, I already knew the answer before he said it. She was with some guy. The room suddenly felt silent. Are you sure it was her? Positive. I couldn't speak. Mark continued carefully. I didn't want to say anything, but they looked close, close. That single word hit harder than any accusation. After we hung up, I sat there for hours, trying to convince myself there was an innocent explanation. Maybe it was a business dinner. Maybe it was networking. Maybe, but deep down I knew. The truth was standing right in front of me. I just wasn't ready to face it. When Emma returned home, she seemed happier than she'd been in months. She talked nonstop about opportunities, investors, connections, future plans, but she never mentioned the dinner, not once. And that told me everything. From that point forward, I started paying attention, not because I wanted to catch her. Because I needed answers. The woman I loved was becoming a stranger, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. A few weeks later, the truth finally revealed itself. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. Emma was in the shower. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter. Suddenly, a message appeared. This time, I couldn't look away. The preview was impossible to misunderstand. Miss you already. Last night was perfect. Richard Collins. My entire body went cold. There was no business explanation, no misunderstanding, no innocent interpretation. The affair was real. The woman I had loved for 10 years was cheating on me. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. For several minutes, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. Everything we'd built together suddenly felt like a lie. Every memory, every promise, every dream destroyed. When Emma walked into the kitchen a few minutes later, she immediately noticed my expression. What's wrong? I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, I saw someone I didn't recognize. I held up her phone. The color drained from her face. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt endless. Finally, I asked one question. How long? Emma looked away. That answer alone told me everything. How long? I repeated. Her voice was barely a whisper. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of deception. Half a year of pretending our marriage still mattered. The pain was overwhelming. But strangely, I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just felt empty. Completely empty. Emma started crying. I'm sorry. Sorry. The word sounded meaningless. Because people don't accidentally betray someone for 6 months. They choose it. Again and again. Every day. Every lie, every secret, every decision. I looked at her and asked the question that haunted me most. Why? For a moment, she hesitated. Then she answered honestly. And her answer shattered what remained of my heart. Because Richard understands the life I want. I stared at her. What does that mean? She wiped away tears. It means I want more. The same word again. More, not love, not trust, not loyalty, more money, more luxury, more status, more everything, except gratitude. That night was the longest night of my life. Hours of painful conversations followed. The affair, the lies, the secret meetings, the hidden trips, everything came out. And each truth hurt more than the last. But the most painful part wasn't learning about Richard. It was realizing Emma no longer loved the life we built together. She had already left emotionally months ago. Her body had simply taken longer to follow. Over the following weeks, our marriage collapsed completely. Arguments became daily. Silence became normal. The house that once felt warm suddenly felt empty. Then one evening, Emma finally said the words I knew were coming. I want a divorce. I nodded slowly. Because by then, I already knew there was nothing left to save. But what I didn't know was this. Emma believed she was leaving me for a dream of wealth, luxury, power, and happiness. What she couldn't see was that her dream was about to become her worst nightmare. And when the truth about Richard Collins finally surfaced, it would destroy far more than their relationship. It would destroy everything she had sacrificed our marriage for. The day Emma moved out of our house, the silence felt unbearable. For 10 years, every room had carried pieces of our life together. The kitchen where we shared morning coffee, the living room where we watched movies on lazy weekends, the bedroom where we whispered dreams about the future. Now, all that remained were memories. I stood in the driveway and watched the moving truck pull away. Emma didn't look back, not once. She sat in the passenger seat of a luxury SUV that belonged to Richard Collins. As the vehicle disappeared around the corner, I felt a strange mixture of pain and relief. The woman I loved was gone, but so were the lies, and sometimes the truth hurts less than deception. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest of my life. I struggled to sleep. I struggled to focus. I struggled to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Friends called constantly. Family members checked on me. Everyone wanted to help. But there are certain kinds of pain nobody can carry for you. You have to walk through them alone. Every morning, I woke up hoping the nightmare was over. Every morning, reality reminded me it wasn't. Social media made everything worse. Everywhere I looked, Emma seemed happier than ever. There she was on a yacht. There she was at luxury resorts. There she was smiling beside Richard at exclusive events. The comments beneath their photos were filled with admiration. Perfect couple. Relationship goals. What a beautiful life. Nobody knew the truth. Nobody knew that life had been built on betrayal. One evening, after seeing another photo of them together, I nearly threw my phone across the room. Instead, I turned it off. That was the moment something changed inside me. I realized I had two choices. I could spend the rest of my life focusing on what I'd lost, or I could focus on what remained. And what remained was me. For the first time in months, I walked into my office with a clear mind. I stopped checking Emma's social media. I stopped asking mutual friends about her. I stopped replaying old memories. Instead, I poured every ounce of energy into my business. Work became my therapy. Not because I wanted revenge, because I needed purpose. The construction company I had spent years building suddenly became my entire focus. I took on larger projects, expanded into commercial construction, hired new employees, developed partnerships, worked harder than I ever had before. Some nights I stayed at the office until midnight. Some mornings I arrived before sunrise. It wasn't easy. But for the first time since the divorce, I felt alive again. Every achievement reminded me that my future didn't depend on Emma, and little by little, I started healing. 6 months passed. Then 8, then nearly a year. The pain never disappeared completely, but it no longer controlled me. Meanwhile, Emma's life appeared perfect, at least from the outside. Richard continued showing her the world. Private jets, luxury hotels, exclusive parties, the lifestyle she always dreamed about. Mutual friends couldn't stop talking about them. Richard bought her a new Mercedes. They're planning a wedding. They might move into a mansion outside Dallas. Every story sounded more unbelievable than the last, and honestly, it no longer bothered me, because by then I had learned something important. People often show the world their highlights, not their reality, a lesson that would soon become very important. One afternoon, I attended a business conference in Houston. During a networking event, I found myself speaking with an older businessman named Victor Ramirez. We discussed construction, investments, and real estate. Eventually, Richard's name came up. The moment I mentioned him, Victor's expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. "You know Richard Collins?" he asked. "I know of him." Victor gave a small nod, then he looked around carefully before speaking. "Be careful who you trust in this industry." Something about his tone caught my attention. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Let's just say Richard's reputation isn't as clean as people think." I felt my stomach tighten. "What kind of reputation?" Victor took a sip of his drink. "The kind that looks perfect from a distance." That answer stayed with me long after the conversation ended. For the first time, I wondered if Richard was hiding something. At the time, I dismissed it. After all, every successful businessman has critics. But over the following months, similar comments appeared again and again. Small remarks, quiet warnings. Subtle concerns, nothing specific, nothing concrete, just enough to raise questions. Then came the engagement announcement. Emma posted a photo online showing a massive diamond ring. The caption read, "Forever starts now." Thousands of people congratulated them. Friends celebrated. Family members shared the post. The image spread everywhere. And for a brief moment, I wondered if maybe she had won. Maybe she really had found the perfect life she wanted. Maybe I was the only one left behind. But what I didn't know was that Richard's world was already beginning to crack. The signs were hidden, invisible to most people, yet they were there. Business deals were falling apart. Investors were asking difficult questions. Financial reports weren't matching public claims, and behind the scenes, pressure was building. Fast. One evening, nearly 14 months after the divorce, I received an unexpected call from an old acquaintance. His name was Brian. He worked in commercial real estate. After some casual conversation, he lowered his voice. "Have you heard the rumors about Richard?" Immediately, my attention sharpened. "No," Brian sighed. "Then you didn't hear it from me." "Hear what?" Another pause. Then he finally spoke. "Federal investigators are looking into several of his companies." I nearly dropped the phone. "What? Nothing official yet, just rumors." Rumors. The same word that often appears before scandals become headlines. I thanked him and ended the call. For several minutes, I sat in silence, trying to process what I had heard. Could it be true? Could the millionaire who stole my wife be hiding something far bigger than anyone realized? Part of me wanted to ignore it. The chapter was over. Emma was gone. Richard was her problem now. But curiosity is difficult to silence. Over the next few weeks, whispers continued spreading through the business community. Several of Richard's projects suddenly stopped moving forward. A few investors quietly withdrew funding. Industry insiders became increasingly cautious. Yet publicly, everything still looked perfect. The parties continued. The vacations continued. The expensive lifestyle continued. Emma continued posting smiling photos online. The illusion remained intact. But illusions don't last forever. And eventually, the truth always finds its way into the light. One rainy afternoon, I was leaving a client meeting when I saw something unexpected. Richard standing outside a downtown office building. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't confident, he wasn't surrounded by admirers. Instead, he looked stressed, anxious, almost afraid. He was arguing with another man in the parking lot. Even from a distance, I could see the tension. The conversation appeared intense. Then the other man walked away. Richard remained standing there alone. For a moment, our eyes met. Just a brief second. But in that second, I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. And that's when I knew. The perfect life Emma had chosen wasn't nearly as perfect as it seemed. Something was coming. Something big. Something capable of destroying everything. And when it finally arrived, the consequences would reach far beyond Richard Collins. They would reach Emma too. Because sometimes the most dangerous betrayal isn't the one committed against another person. Sometimes it's the betrayal of your own values. And Emma was about to learn that lesson the hardest way possible. The first headline appeared on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't looking for news about Richard Collins. In fact, I had spent months trying not to think about him at all. But as I sat in my office drinking coffee before a meeting, a notification appeared on my phone. At first, I almost ignored it. Then I saw the name, prominent Texas real estate investor under investigation. My stomach tightened. I opened the article, and there it was, Richard Collins. For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen. The article didn't accuse him of a crime directly. Not yet. But investigators were reportedly examining several of his companies. Questions had been raised about financial records, investor funds, and business transactions. The details were still emerging, but one thing was already clear. The perfect image Richard had spent years building was beginning to crack. I leaned back in my chair and slowly exhaled. A strange feeling washed over me, not happiness, not satisfaction. Just disbelief. The man who seemed untouchable was suddenly vulnerable, and I couldn't stop thinking about Emma, because whether she realized it or not, her future was tied to his. Over the next few weeks, the story exploded. News outlets began covering every new development. Business magazines questioned previous deals. Former partners started speaking anonymously. Investors demanded answers. The whispers I had heard months earlier were no longer whispers. They were headlines, and every headline brought new problems. The first major blow came when one of Richard's largest development projects was suspended. Millions of dollars were suddenly frozen. Construction stopped. Contracts were reviewed. Investors began pulling out. Then another project collapsed. Then another. One by one, the foundations of Richard's empire started falling apart. And when money stops flowing, loyalty often disappears with it. Business partners who once praised him suddenly distanced themselves. People who once competed for his attention stopped answering calls. Friends became strangers. Supporters became critics. The same people who celebrated his success now questioned everything. It was happening faster than anyone expected, especially Emma. A mutual friend called me one evening. Her name was Lisa. She had remained friendly with both of us after the divorce. We talked occasionally, nothing personal, nothing dramatic, but during that conversation she mentioned something unexpected. "I saw Emma today." For a moment, I stayed silent. Then I asked, "How is she?" Lisa hesitated. "Honestly, yeah, she looks scared." That answer surprised me. Emma had always been confident. Even during our divorce, she never seemed uncertain. But now, scared. "What happened?" I asked. Lisa sighed. "People are talking. Everyone's worried about Richard." I nodded slowly. "I heard. Emma keeps saying everything will be fine. But she doesn't sound like she believes it." After we ended the call, I found myself staring out the office window. For years, Emma had believed Richard represented security, power, success, a better future. Now that image was collapsing right in front of her, and she had nowhere to hide from it. As the months passed, the situation became worse, much worse. Investigations expanded, more financial records were examined. Several lawsuits appeared. Investors demanded compensation. Former associates publicly accused Richard of misleading them. The pressure became impossible to ignore. And then came the moment everything changed. One morning, every major business outlet carried the same story. Federal authorities had officially launched legal action involving several of Richard's companies. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, social media exploded. News channels discussed it nonstop. Financial analysts dissected every detail. Richard's reputation was collapsing in real time, and with it, so was his fortune. The luxury lifestyle that once seemed endless suddenly began disappearing. Properties were sold. Accounts were frozen. Assets were reviewed. Expensive toys became liabilities. The empire that had taken years to build seemed to crumble overnight. For the first time since the divorce, I looked at Emma's social media page. The difference was shocking. The smiling vacation photos had stopped. The glamorous posts were gone. The constant updates had disappeared. Silence had replaced them, and silence often says more than words ever could. A few weeks later, I learned something else. Richard had postponed the wedding. Officially, it was because of business complications. But everyone knew the truth. The relationship was under enormous pressure. The dream life Emma had chased was falling apart, and no amount of luxury could stop it. Then something happened that nobody expected. Richard disappeared, not literally, but publicly. The man who once loved attention suddenly vanished from events, interviews, and social gatherings. He stopped appearing in public. Stopped posting online, stopped answering questions. People began speculating. Rumors spread everywhere. Some said he was negotiating settlements. Others claimed he was trying to protect what remained of his fortune. Nobody knew the full truth, but one thing became obvious. The confident millionaire Emma had chosen was gone. And the person replacing him looked very different. One evening, Lisa called again. This time her voice sounded serious. "Daniel, what happened?" She paused. then quietly said, "Richard left." For several seconds, I didn't understand. "Left? He moved out." I sat up straight. "What do you mean?" "I mean he left Emma." The room went silent. After everything, after the affair, after the divorce, after the engagement, after all the promises, he simply walked away. I couldn't believe it. "What happened?" I asked. Lisa sighed. "Nobody knows exactly. But apparently things got ugly. Ugly. That word barely scratched the surface. Months earlier, Richard had promised Emma the world. Now, when his world started collapsing, he abandoned her. The same way she had abandoned me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emma had left a husband who stayed through difficult times, only to end up with a man who disappeared when difficult times arrived. And suddenly, for the first time, she was completely alone. No millionaire, no luxury dream, no perfect future. Just consequences. Yet despite everything, I didn't feel victorious. I expected satisfaction, maybe even relief. Instead, I felt something else. Sadness. Because once upon a time, Emma wasn't the woman who chased wealth. She wasn't the woman who betrayed her marriage. She wasn't the woman now sitting alone among the ruins of her choices. At some point, she had lost herself, and now she was paying the price. But the story wasn't over yet, because Richard's downfall was only part of the ending. The hardest lesson was still waiting for Emma, and soon she would come face to face with the one thing she had spent years trying to escape. The truth. The truth about money, the truth about loyalty, and the truth about what she had thrown away. Almost 2 years had passed since Emma walked out of our marriage. 2 years since she chose Richard. 2 years since she looked me in the eyes and said she wanted more from life. Back then, those words had destroyed me. Now they felt like echoes from another lifetime. My life looked very different. The construction company had grown beyond anything I imagined. We had expanded into multiple cities across Texas. I had hired dozens of new employees. For the first time in years, I wasn't simply surviving. I was thriving. More importantly, I had found peace. Not the kind that comes from success, the kind that comes from acceptance. I accepted what happened. I accepted the pain. I accepted that some people enter your life to teach lessons, not stay forever. And because of that, I had finally moved forward. Then one evening, everything came full circle. My phone rang. The number wasn't saved. Normally, I would have ignored it, but for some reason, I answered. "Hello." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then I heard a familiar voice. "Daniel." The moment I heard her, I knew. Emma. A voice I hadn't heard in nearly a year. A voice that once meant everything to me. Now it felt distant. Like a memory from another life. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she quietly asked, "Can we meet?" I looked out the window of my office. The sun was setting over Austin. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to leave the past where it belonged. But another part of me knew this conversation had been waiting to happen. Finally, I answered. "Okay." We agreed to meet 2 days later. A small coffee shop on the edge of the city. The same place where we once spent countless weekends together during our early years of marriage. Maybe that was intentional, maybe it wasn't. Either way, it felt symbolic. When I arrived, Emma was already there, sitting alone by the window. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked older, because she looked tired. The confidence that once filled every room had disappeared. The woman sitting there looked emotionally exhausted. As if life had drained every ounce of certainty from her. She looked up, our eyes met. And for the first time in years, I saw genuine sadness. Not self-pity, not frustration. Regret, real regret. I sat down across from her. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "You look good." I smiled politely. "So do you." It wasn't entirely true. But I wasn't there to hurt her. She looked down at her coffee, then took a deep breath. "Daniel, I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. Simple words, yet loaded with years of pain. I nodded slowly. But I didn't answer, because apologies are complicated, especially when they arrive years late. Tears filled her eyes. "I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything." "No," I said gently. "It doesn't," she nodded, as if she expected that answer. Then she finally said something I never thought I would hear. I made the biggest mistake of my life. For a moment, neither of us moved. The old version of me would have celebrated hearing those words. The version that spent sleepless nights wondering why I wasn't enough. The version that wanted validation, justice, closure. But sitting there now, I felt none of those things. Because healing had changed me. I no longer needed her regret to feel whole. Emma wiped away tears. I thought money would make me happy. I stayed silent. She continued. I thought success looked like private jets, luxury homes, expensive vacations. Her voice cracked. I thought I was choosing a better life. Then she looked directly into my eyes. But I was really just running away from gratitude. That sentence hit harder than anything else she said. Because it was true, she wasn't chasing Richard. She was chasing an illusion that promised happiness without appreciating what she already had. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly asked the question she'd clearly been carrying for months. Did you ever hate me? I thought about it honestly. The answer surprised even me. No, she looked confused. No, I shook my head. I was hurt. Destroyed honestly. But hate, I paused. No, tears rolled down her cheeks. Why? I leaned back slightly. Because hate would have kept me trapped in the past. She lowered her eyes. And for the first time, I think she understood how much I had changed. After a while, she told me everything. The financial collapse, the investigations, the lawsuits, the stress, the fear, the endless promises Richard never kept. Then she told me something that explained everything. When things got difficult, he disappeared. I nodded, because I already knew. She laughed bitterly. You stayed when life was difficult. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Years earlier, she had left a man who stood beside her through every struggle, only to choose someone who vanished at the first sign of trouble. Eventually, our conversation came to an end. The sun had almost disappeared. The coffee shop was beginning to empty. Emma looked at me one last time. There was one final question in her eyes, a question she never actually asked. Could we ever start over? Could things ever be the same? But deep down, I think she already knew the answer. Some chapters are meant to close, not because people are evil. Not because forgiveness is impossible, but because growth sometimes leads people in different directions. I stood up. So this is goodbye? Emma's voice trembled. I smiled gently. I think so, she nodded, trying to be strong, trying not to cry. Then I said the one thing she least expected. I hope you find happiness. The tears returned instantly. Because she understood what those words meant. They weren't spoken with anger, or revenge, or bitterness. They were spoken with peace, and peace is something money can never buy. As I walked toward the exit, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because Emma suffered, not because Richard lost everything, not because karma finally arrived, but because their choices no longer controlled my life. Outside, the evening air felt cool, fresh, free. For years, I thought revenge meant making someone feel the same pain they caused you. I was wrong. Real revenge isn't destruction. It's transformation. It's becoming stronger because of what happened. It's building a better future instead of living in the ruins of the past. Emma lost the millionaire. Richard lost his empire. But the greatest loss wasn't financial. It was trust. Because once trust is broken, rebuilding it is harder than rebuilding any business, house, or fortune. And that is the lesson I carry with me today. Never trade loyalty for luxury. Never sacrifice real love for temporary excitement. And never assume that money can replace character. Because wealth can disappear overnight. Status can vanish. Success can fade. But integrity stays. And in the end, integrity is worth more than all the millions in the world. As I drove home that night, I looked toward the future instead of the past. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't thinking about betrayal. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I'd gained. Strength. Wisdom, peace. And sometimes that's the greatest victory of all.